Welcome to the Healing Place podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode. We have a topic that I believe that will interest all of our listeners on today. We are going to be talking about the effects of trauma within a relationship. And so today we have a special guest. I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself because I want us to go ahead and jump right into our discussion for today. So I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and let's get this going.
All right, amazing. Thank you. So my name is Laurel Soleil, and I am a psychotherapist, formally trained psychotherapist, and a relationship coach. And I've been at this, I guess I graduated in 2006 with my master's, so it's been a long time. Somebody else can do the math on that one. I'm not really sure how long it's and my focus has always been on trauma and relationship. And I originally started in private practice, working one-to-one with people, and now I do mostly group online, and one-to-one still, but all online, like remote. And it's all relationship and trauma focused, and sort of like why? Well, because trauma is becoming more understood as an experience, and I think what's becoming more understood is how trauma isn't the archaic definition or thought, which is something really bad happened to me and I was traumatized. And then life went on. That's not it. It's or something really bad happened to me and then I developed an addiction. It's like, well, no. It's become the perspective and breadth of what trauma is has become much wider, broader, and bigger. So when I was doing my relationship coaching and my relationship therapy, I mean, what we were coming up against was not that marriages weren't working. It's that people were coming up against their own trauma. Their partner was triggering their trauma. Why? Because our trauma gets triggered when we have unresolved trauma. So that actually marital counseling and support and guidance and facilitation, or just couples work, whether you're married or not, or you're deciding to be in long-term relationship or want to fix somebody you're not sure about, whatever it is, you have to actually start to bring in the conversation of what happened in your childhood. What was your relationship like with your parents? Was one of them an addict or mentally ill, or did somebody pass at a young age? Because all of these things, if we've never really looked at that and how they may influence who we are, we'll get triggered in our most intimate relationships, aka our partnerships. So that actually relationship therapy and relationship coaching can't go without the trauma work. Okay, so that's sort of why I focus in it. That's a little bit about me. I've got 3 kids. I live very internationally. I've been married, divorced. My eldest child is a shared custody, so I get the turmoil of that. I've got 2 other children with my husband. And what else about me? That's it, I think.
Okay. You have I love your why, and I love the way that you approach relationship therapy and the coaching side of it. And I think a lot of times people don't understand why they fail at relationships, and they feel like, it's me. Or then you get those who say it's everybody else. I love those who come to me and they start saying that they've been married 7 times and it was everybody. I'm like, oh, so all 7 times it was everybody, but you're the only common denominator within this whole thing, And so I want us to really talk about, I know you mentioned triggers and going and digging back into childhood and recognizing that some of the events that took place during early life is really affecting what is going on within their relationship. So if someone came to you today and they said to you, hey, I'm married and my spouse isn't being as intimate with me as I desire. And then, the spouse says, well, I tried to touch them, but they don't want me touching them, and there's a breakdown. How would you approach that type of situation?
Sure. So first I'd want to find out, is that just happening with this current partner, or has that been thematic? Meaning, has this Did this happen with the last partner and the partner before that? And if it's a situation where it's like, no, I've never experienced this before, then I would want to get really into understanding how this partner was different from the other partners.
Mhm.
Because there's something within the context of this particular person that's reminding that person that's having the like, oh, please don't touch me response. There's something happening, a defense mechanism, something's living within the body, a body based, likely heightened nervous system, protective response. It's not necessarily meaning that that partner, let's just say that man, let's just use woman and male, that man is bad or aggressive. It just means it could be a nonverbal communication. It could be the way the man's eyebrows are, the facial features, the gesture, could be signaling something to the woman's nervous system that
Mhm.
reminds her of something so way back when, so far away that
Mhm.
she's not even really aware of it, but her nervous system is, or what we could say is her perceptive ability,
Mhm.
the how we perceive but we don't necessarily know why. It's like we could also call this a sense of intuition, but I think though there is some subtle differences between what we're talking about here. But we could say it's like an intuitive sense, it's a perceptive sense, it's a protective sense.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, what would I do is I would first want to find out, is this always happening? Has this happened with every partner?
Mhm.
Because then we're really looking at something maybe a little different
Mhm.
versus is it just happening with this man? And then we want to look at like what she's feeling, what she's thinking, what she's experiencing. So the work is not to get the guy to change, it's to actually work with what's happening within her nervous system and to help healing from that place. Then, of course, yes, we need to make the man very aware of hey, this has come out. She's got this trauma. When you approach her in this way, she feels this way. It's not something you're doing, it's not your fault, but you could change it in these ways.
Mhm.
Are you willing? Yeah, of course. Great. Are you not? No. Okay, well, then we need to look at maybe this isn't the right relationship, right? So it's really empowering our selves. I guess our it's increasing our sense of awareness and understanding of what's actually happening in the relationship. So we stop the blame, we
Mhm.
stop the shame, we stop the you're doing this, and we start to understand why we're feeling this. And then
Mhm.
we get really clear from each other whether we're going to do the work to change it or not.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that's really good, and I wanted you to go into that because I want the audience to understand that this type of work, number one, is a individual work in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not about where you're gonna sit down and you're gonna find fault in the other person. No, because if you're the one that has dealt with the trauma, you
Hmm.
have to get healed first, even in order to be able to look correctly at your partner. So I know we talked about in our earlier conversation about how people will begin to cope with alcohol and drugs and things of that nature, and because of the traumas, and they don't realize that they've been through trauma. It's
Hmm.
almost as though they went, like I said, it's normal now,
Hmm.
but going through it, say when you were a child and you might be in your 40s or your 50s now, and not realizing that you're angry, you can get sometimes where you are depressed, or you just are irritable and frustrated, and then your coping mechanism is, I'm gonna go and drink, or I'm gonna go and do drugs, or whatever way they feel like they need to release. And here it is, you're in a relationship, or you're married, whatever it may be, and it's causing so much turmoil within this relationship.
Hmm.
And learning how to, or really being able to identify that it is you,
Hmm.
or knowing it's you, but you don't feel like anybody can hear or see you. Am I making sense?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
um feel like anybody can, they're hearing or seeing you. Because i had
Hmm.
a i had a young lady who actually was, and I had to refer her out because her trauma, she was just so traumatized.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And trying to get her to see that your relationships are failing, not because of them but because of you not willing to really name the thing that you went through because everybody told you that it wasn't that big of a deal,
Right. Right.
you know? And so
Exactly.
because they told you it wasn't that big of a deal and they told you just get on with life,
Mhm.
it's now X amount of years later and it is really, really, really destroying you.
Mhm.
And you
Right.
are destroying every relationship that comes your way like a tornado. You know, you're calm and then all of a sudden you go in this and you're spiraling out of control with your drinking and your drugging and then you're promiscuous
Yeah.
and you're not faithful to your partner.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
can we discuss, issues and things like that?
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, so I want to definitely talk about two parts of that. And
Okay.
one is definitely the coping mechanisms. I just want to say something first. So if I forget to come back to the coping mechanisms, remind me, okay, Brianna. So I think that a lot of trauma work comes back to this like know thyself concept.
Mhm.
Because the truth is like culture in the way that we have it right now is not going to be understanding. If our mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, school teachers were not understanding, well then we can't really expect that our coworkers, bosses, taxi drivers like we just nobody wants to sort of, it's not that nobody wants to, I want to erase that word. I think it's that we don't have the um we don't have the knowledge and the patience to deal with the discomfort it brings us to hear about other people's hard times.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I don't know how to fix it. It's a lot of discomfort. So if, just to give an example, if my neighbor comes and discloses something to me, okay, let's say I'm not a therapist. I might not I might be like, well, I've got three kids and I need to make dinner and like, just buck up, carry on. I don't, right? It's like I don't have the, we don't have the sort of culture built in to support this, right? So that person who came to me and disclosed something traumatic or about themselves or an argument that just happened in their partnership, or that they're using more alcohol than they want to be using, they're going to feel really misunderstood, rejected, and abandoned by having come to me and then gotten my response, because I can't, I got my own shit, right? Like I can't. So
Right.
so I think when it comes back to this know thyself, it's like when we know that what we're struggling with is real, we don't need the validation, and we get a feeling of rejection from somebody, or we feel somebody didn't understand us. When we know, when we're like in this know thyself place, we can be like, okay, that's, we can have more of an objective place. That's that lady, she didn't get me, but I get me, and I know what I'm experiencing is real. And I know that when I wake up in the morning and I have this, it's real. Like I no longer need to go out and get validated. I know this is me, right? When I feel like my partner always looks at me in this way, but he says, I don't look at you in that. I know I know it. And I know it triggers me because I've done my work and I'm really clearly got a read on myself. Okay.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm. It
Okay.
does.
So then I think that when we haven't done that trauma work to really have that secure read on ourselves, and we're not coming from that contained place of know thyself, what happens then is we feel so further damaged by other people's lack of understanding and rejection and abandonment. That's when we start drinking. That's when we start drugging. That's when we're more promiscuous. That's when we yell at our partners more, like, you don't get me. And it's like, no, he probably doesn't, but you don't get you either. And you're looking to him to get you before you get you.
Mhm.
That's a huge problem. You don't need to stay with him, but you can't blame him for not getting you till you get you, and then make the conscious decision to leave, or the conscious decision to stay, but to stay with a partner who doesn't get you. Right.
Mhm.
So okay. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think that was
Okay.
you did. I think because it made me think about how many times people say that, and that's where we're at, right? So we're in that place where people are saying, "You don't get me, nobody gets me," blah. But it's like, but like you said, I love what you said, but you don't get your own self.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get you, and because you don't get you, I'm like, because you don't get you, you don't get to project that off on other people.
Exactly.
And that's what you're doing. And so now you are in the phase of I'm gonna let this person go. I'm not taking this, I'm not taking that. And it's like you might be letting go of some really good relationships
Mhm.
because you refuse to do, because a lot of times people are refusing to do the work that they need to do
Yeah.
because it hurts. Nobody wants to sit in that hurt, because you, in order to heal, you have to revisit it.
Mhm.
You have to. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You have to revisit it. And yes, it's gonna hurt. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, but
Mhm.
you have to in order for you to be able to get over it. Because if you can't name the thing,
That's
it
right.
is bound to continue to haunt you. I call it a shadow that's going to continue to just follow you throughout life, and it's going to peep out, and then
Mhm.
it's going to go back in, then it's going to come back out. And so doing the self work
Yeah.
is so important. And for those who get in these relationships, I think for me, a lot of times people can see the red flags of someone who has dealt with trauma,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they see the red flags and they still go past the red flags like it's and go forward, and then they wind up in these relationships and they don't know what to do with them, with the
That's right.
people that they're in relationship with.
That's right.
So what would you tell a partner that is in a relationship with somebody that is dealing with trauma, and they refuse or they don't want to get the help that they need?
Mhm. So, what would I say to the person who's saying to me, my partner, I see all this trauma in my partner and they won't do the work?
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, you can only do so much work to be at peace in that relationship.
Hmm.
But so long as you're with somebody who's unwilling to do the change, the relationship you have right now is the relationship you will have. I mean, it takes a very evolved person to stay in relationship with somebody who won't change. It's like, so expect the same triggers, expect the same habits,
Hmm.
expect nothing to change. Because what happens is you could be in therapy every week working on yourself to change, but you go right back into the home, or you go out on that date, or you go do that thing, and that other person who's not changing is there, right there, and you get triggered again.
Hmm.
Like it's like that change is so small and incremental that right? It's like you go hang out with that person, you go home to that person, and you're like 10 steps backwards. Forget therapy even happened that week. So the first thing I would say is you know, it's a beautiful opportunity to really look at what's getting triggered within you and
Hmm.
make the changes. But at a certain point, you're likely going to plateau if your partner isn't making change. And so you have to stop blaming your partner for your relationship. You're choosing to be in a relationship with a person that won't change. So
Hmm.
you're going to have to consciously accept that if you want to stay in the relationship. But part of what you're going to have to work on is no longer blaming, shaming, or judging, really, because that person is just where they're at.
Hmm.
Or it can be your deal breaker. And then if they're like, no, I don't want to go, I don't, well, then we need to look at that. What's happening there? Are we in some codependency? Are we in some addictive dependent tendencies? Like what's happening that you're identifying? It's like saying there's a monster in that corner, but I don't want to leave the room. I won't leave the room. You know, it's like what's happening for that person in that process. So those would be the two places I'd start with that person. Yeah.
Hmm. And I think and I'm asking you this because a lot of times people don't understand that when you go into therapy, you're going to be asked these hard questions, and to that they are hard questions, because
Yeah.
if you come to me and you're doing the work and then you're telling me that, hey, I'm going home and this person isn't willing to change,
Mhm.
then you're making a decision. If you keep going into it, you're making a decision now. So whose fault
Exactly.
is it now?
Exactly. Yeah, it's personal choice, right? It all comes down to our own free will and personal choice. There's
Hmm.
a personal choice to stay in the relationship. We can't blame it then, right? I mean, we just can't.
Yeah. So I want us to talk about, because this is something that I love to hear um talked about within when I'm getting my continuing education credits. I love to talk about codependency,
Mhm.
because then, like you said, then you get into, okay, why aren't you wanting to leave? And then you get into that, oh, you're being codependent. So let us talk about that, because a lot of times people, I say, just my personal opinion, I think there's more people that are codependent and don't realize it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
You're like willing to stay in this this gosh, I've been like, you're in hell, but you're willing to stay. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you're right. I think that we are codependent. I mean, there's codependent aspects of my own marriage. And I'm a relationship coach and psychotherapist. Like, it's not scary and bad and horrible. I think it can lead to scary and bad and horrible situations. But
Mhm.
I think like codependency is sort of a natural, in one sense. This is like the positive side. Like there's a natural inclination for us as like a mammalian species to rely. We're social beings. We're wired for connection.
Mhm.
So there's a natural desire to be in connection with others, which is why ghosting or being rejected, or that's why it hurts so bad. Like it hurts almost, right?
Mhm.
Because it's going against the natural impulse of our mammalian species, of how we're literally wired for survival. So I get it. The infant comes out, that infant will only survive and thrive with human social connection, right? So we're wired for it. Now, could we say, you leave that infant in the room and they start crying and they're codependent? Well, yeah, for really good positive reasons.
Right.
So, okay, so we can use this word in a really interesting way. And I think that's important to point out that, everything has a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
So then you go and you use codependency in kind of the more clinical way, and what we look at is it gets severe.
Mhm.
Like, you know, I don't want to make choices anymore that might make that person upset, because then I'm going to have to feel bad because I don't know how to be uncomfortable when I've said no to somebody else and it makes me uncomfortable. And so, no, I won't ask for my needs to be met. I won't say anything that makes that other person uncomfortable because, phew, at least then I don't have to feel bad. I don't have to feel their anger. I don't have to feel rejected. I don't have to feel stupid. So that would be kind of the opposite side of the spectrum,
Mhm.
where we literally are changing our own behavior to accommodate for somebody else because we don't want to feel the feels that that person's reaction is going to have. Does that
Mm.
make
It makes a lot of sense.
sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I have had a couple of people that I have had to help would kind of facilitate a process that they were going through, and it was teaching and trying to get them to get to a place of being assertive. I said there's a difference between being assertive and aggressive. I said, but to be able to articulate your wants and your needs and your desires, I
Hmm.
said not meaning that people are going to hear you or necessarily say they can, but you have to get to a place of being able to accept it, for one. Um, Two, being able to articulate what is it that you're wanting, and
Hmm.
then being able to handle if they say no.
Yeah.
Every relationship doesn't mean that it's going to be a lifelong relationship, and some relationships just have to come to an end in order for you to be able to grow.
Yeah. Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't grow if I'm constantly having to adapt and I want to it's a word I want to use, but if I'm constantly having to, people like to use the word submissive and such to me in such a negative way, because I shouldn't have to constantly submit to me being a lower than who I really am. Does that make sense? So I
Hmm.
don't want to lower myself as a person, as a woman, just to
Hmm.
make you happy.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, I can compromise, but I'm not going to constantly lower
Yeah.
who I am. Because if
Yeah.
I have need for, like you said, affection,
Hmm.
because we all want to be in relationship, and then especially healthy relationships. And I'm
Hmm.
saying I have need for affection, and the way that I receive affection or love is I just use touch,
Hmm.
hugs or whatever it is, and you are a person who refuses, you don't like it, it makes you feel funny, and you're not willing to change,
Hmm.
and you're hearing me, then that's not you. I want people to, our listeners, to listen and hear what I'm saying. It is not you.
Yeah.
Nothing is wrong with you. Everybody is entitled to how they feel they want to function,
Hmm.
whether it's healthy or toxic. That's their
Hmm.
right as a human being.
Hmm.
Just like it's your right as a human being to function and to get through life the way that you feel is healthy, or helps you get through. But it's not fair to yourself to continue to be in relationship with people who aren't compatible with you.
Mhm.
A lot of times people feel, I was talking to someone, I want to get your advice on this. So I was
Mhm.
talking to someone and we were talking about relationships, and this person is very desperate for a relationship. And I was, we were talking about values, and I said, I think when you're entering into a relationship, you really need to discover the values that that person has. I said, because if your values aren't adding up, it's going to make it hard for your core values. It's going to make it hard for your relationship to work.
That's right. Yeah.
And this person could not understand. They felt like, again, they used the word submissive. Well,
Mhm.
I mean, we should be able to submit one to another, but I can't submit to someone who we don't see life the same. We're
Mhm.
gonna have differences. No two people are the same. We differences, but not at my core.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
core of who I am. If you are the total opposite of who I am at the core, that
Mhm.
would bother me. I think even for a normal person who
Mhm.
has never went through trauma in their life,
Yeah.
I think that would be
Yeah.
traumatizing to them
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
it would make them second guess themselves and everything that they did. Um, if at the core I believe in honesty and you believe in telling little, that's all right. I mean, I wasn't totally dishonest, but it was to me, it's
Yeah.
like, but you lied.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to convince me to be something that I'm not. So I'm gonna give it to you. So you give
Okay.
me what you feel.
Yeah. So I think it's such an interesting way for us to actually bridge into how childhood and relationships with whether it's your parents or a stepfather or a carer, um, what that relationship was like. Because I think a lot of us stay in adult incongruent relationships, like meaning relationships where our values aren't the same, is because and we don't realize we have choice, or we feel we don't have choice because as children we maybe were in some really compromising situations with our parental, I guess that's the better word, right, parental figures,
Mhm,
and we didn't have choice.
mhm,
And many times, whether there was alcoholism or mental health issues, or a parent leaving, or a parent saying, if you're not good, I'll leave, or domestic abuse, or sexual abuse, or neglect, many times we actually felt as children that there was no choice but to comply in order to make that person happy enough that it, because a child has no choice but to imagine it must be their fault, right? They don't
mhm,
have the adult brain to reason and rationalize. So children are always thinking it must be their fault. Parents are fighting, must be my fault. Dad's drinking, must be my fault, right? So so the point I'm trying to make is like, I think we find ourselves in relationships in our adult lives where we feel like we have to be submissive to make that person happy, because that is mirroring a lot of childhood parental relationships.
mhm,
But I think the work, then the therapeutic work, is around self advocacy and like, let's heal that little girl or that little boy inside of you that literally feels like you have no choice. Like, no, you don't have to take it. You
mhm,
feel submissive because you are being submissive to a situation, to a familiar pattern,
mhm.
but it's not one you have to stay in. So I think like what you're saying really bridges back to how, again, we don't have to have had this epic traumatic event in our childhoods to be acting out trauma in relationship. We just maybe had to have a really adverse childhood experiences.
Mhm, mhm.
And then does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense because I mean, it just brings back so much. I had for myself. I remember raising my children, and I have a daughter that is very, she, when I say advocates for herself, she advocates for herself. You have to be careful what you teach your children because they'll bring it back to you. And so I can remember going through something with her, and it was just like she said something to me that made me stop and think as a mother. Like, this is a little person that I brought into the world who thinks for herself, has her own mind, has her own way of seeing things,
Mhm,
who doesn't really understand, the way that I'm thinking. She just
mhm,
sees the world through her own eyes. And I said, you should be happy. I said, you should be happy because I provide this and I provide that. And she came back to me and she said, but aren't you supposed to? Well, you're right.
Yeah.
So when you think about it that way as
Yeah.
parents, we are pushing off. You're supposed to be happy because this is what I'm doing, but you have other needs. My daughter at that time needed me to be something more to her than just a provider
That's right.
because I was supposed to provide. That is my job. That is a part of my job. She doesn't have to do anything in order for me to this I have to feed her.
Yeah.
So why would I push that off like you should be happy I'm feeding you? No, you should
Right.
no, she doesn't. What do you mean? Be happy. That's what aren't you supposed to feed me? You know what I mean? And so as adults now in a relationship,
Mhm,
you're with a partner. So like you said, let's talk women and men. And
mhm,
so the woman is being told, you have a good man because he's a provider.
mhm, mm,
He doesn't love me. He doesn't talk to me. Emotionally, he's zero. We sit in the house. We just don't do nothing. All he does is provide.
mhm,
And everybody around me is telling me because as a child, I was told I should
yeah,
be grateful. And now here it is, I'm told again, I'm supposed to be grateful as though this is all I can. I'm only good for
mhm,
this and nothing more. I
exactly.
have no voice. I don't get to express how I really feel because it would be demonized to do that. So I'm miserable. So
Mm,
then you wonder why, and we get back to the coping. So now you're wondering, why am I drinking all the time? Well, that's why. 'Cause I'm drowning in emotions that I don't have permission
mhm,
or I don't feel like I have permission to be able to express.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, so then the affair happens, right? Well, you go find somebody else, you know,
Mhm,
and it's quick fix.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I had a situation where I was with a young lady and, as therapists, you try not to you're not supposed to. But I was listening to her story and I found myself when I got off, I had to go call a colleague to debrief because I felt so bad.
Mm,
I did. I felt bad because I was thinking to myself, wow, wow, like how much more could a person actually take within a marriage?
mm, mhm,
How much more could a person actually take knowing that I have said what I wanted and it's been ignored and ignored and ignored. And then the teachings, because it wasn't, because sometimes we have learned behaviors
yeah.
and our values are based upon what we've learned
Mm,
and not basically upon us developing developing into who we are and
mhm,
what we like and what we feel is right and what we feel is wrong. We just kind of adapt to what we've learned.
yeah. Yeah.
And so, what is going to be better for me, I can't make that choice
Mhm,
because
that's
it's
right.
going to go against what I've
That's right.
learned.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and I believe that that causes another level of trauma for that person.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's sort of, I guess it's almost like rubbing salt in the wound, right? It's like, it is. It's just, if you have a trauma wound that isn't healed and and you're just furthering to be in a destructive, self sabotaging relationship, again, choosing to be, I get it's hard to get out, but choosing to be, um, you're rubbing salt in those wounds. And it's harder to heal over
Mhm.
time. And
Right.
I think what happens is, like, it doesn't just become then the trauma you're healing. Then you have to deal with the addiction or like the coping mechanism behavior too, right? I mean, how many times I've seen that be the case. Like, I work with a woman and then it's like, well, I never used to drink this much. And it's like, okay, well, what do first we have to work with the drinking before we can even get to the trauma.
Hmm.
Right. And then we have to look at how the drinking has destroyed what? Relationships with children,
Hmm.
job loss, didn't finish going back to school. Right. It's like it just the compounded effect of it all.
Hmm.
Um, so significant in people's lives.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think that there's a key here that if people can really start to see without shame and blame and judgment that It's not your drinking. It's not your marriage. It's not, being let go of that job. It's not that you didn't finish school. It's looking back to what happened in your childhood and what you internalized about yourself and what you're worthy of as
Mhm.
a result, and healing that.
Yeah, yeah. And if, those that are listening to us on today, if you can just really get to a place where you realize that what happened to you is not your fault.
Mhm,
It's not your fault.
mhm,
Um, it's not your fault. You are worth more than what you went through, and
mhm,
that it's not too late for you to seek the help that you need. You
mhm,
have choices. You
mhm,
don't have to stay where you're at, regardless of a relationship, regardless of your mental state,
mhm,
emotional state. There is help for you. And um, the choosing the right person to go to is very important, because you do want to make sure that you are within a therapeutic relationship, or your therapist is able to provide you with that non-judgmental atmosphere, because there's nothing that you have went through that tons of other people haven't.
mhm.
There's nothing
Yeah.
that should be able to hold you down in that level, in the level of shame and guilt that you feel. A lot of times people are in leadership positions, and I'm starting a group locally here in town called my nonprofit is called the Restoration Haven, and it's more so for leaders,
Mhm.
because leaders go they when you're in the public eye, you are expected to be a certain type of way,
Yeah.
right? But you're not supposed, and the thing about it is you're not supposed to be human. So you're
Yeah.
not supposed to go through things. You're not supposed to ever hurt. You're not supposed to have emotions and things like that, but you do. And so where can I go to be able to disclose, or be able to just process, hey,
Mhm.
guess what? I met somebody who triggered me and made me think about.
Yeah.
And I thought I had forgotten it. I thought I was over it, but I'm
Mhm.
not.
Mhm. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and the thing, I remember working in the hospital. I would never forget this. And this is what made me really, really think about it. So I was friends with a doctor.
Mm.
Sweetest person you would ever want to meet. Oh, she was funny. And then when we started having these presidential debates and things,
Mm.
and she pulled me to the side one day and she said, I'm leaving the country. And I thought she was joking. And I said, well, wow, where are you going? If you're going, I'm going too. And she said, she started crying. She said, I can't take what's going on. It's making me think about. And she told me something that happened to her when she was in college
Mhm.
that she
Mhm.
never processed.
Mhm.
And she said, I can't tell my husband.
Mm.
She said, but I'm going home. She said, and I am ruining my marriage.
Mm.
And I thought, oh my gosh. And she felt like she couldn't go nowhere because she was seen as like this super doctor.
Mhm.
Like she
Mhm.
was like, I thought she was one of the best doctors I had ever,
Yeah. Yeah.
she was just well rounded, and she was
Yeah.
smart, and she was compassionate, and she just had this spirit about herself. But she felt like she had nobody who could be her to her.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you notice that something is bothering you, and you feel like you have no place to for somebody to um, trusting that you can go to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I mean, talk about feeling alone, right? Alone with your trauma. And then, like, you don't feel it's sort of like the monster in the corner of the room that just took over the room. And now the monster's driving the car, running the show.
Hmm.
You are just completely alone with that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And and sometimes you can't escape. And just using that as a
Mhm.
scenario, because this was on TV, like every
Mhm.
you turn it on, you see clips of debates and clips of what
Yeah.
somebody had said, and it was like nowhere she could go
Yeah.
where she couldn't hear it. I mean, she would go visit
Right.
patients, their TVs would be on, or they would be talking about it. What do you think about this? And it just she would go home, and her husband was, big into politics, and it was
Mhm.
like she had nowhere she could escape it,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. I think it's such a perfect example too of just how our culture has no support. It's like it's not built into the scaffolding or the support of our culture to be there for people with trauma. There's just no room for it. I think the conversation's starting, but like all conversations, it's quiet, it's in the background, and it's going to take, decades before, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's a really sad experience for this woman. Really sad.
Mhm.
And it's an example too, isn't it, of how trauma really unresolved trauma, I guess, feeling victim to our trauma or powerless to our trauma ends up making choices for our life. The trauma literally ends up making choices for our life.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
leaving my husband. I'm leaving my marriage. I can't say anything. I'm leaving the country I'm living in. I'm like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like big life changes. And
Mm,
so, those who are listening, and perhaps it's not you that's dealing with the trauma, but you're dealing with one who has been traumatized and they're dealing with, and you're trying to figure out, well, why are they acting like this? And
mhm.
why are they, this should give you um a different perspective on your loved one. And if you
Abs-
love them and, facilitating the conversation or looking and trying to find help for them and giving them a list so they can, because you want to make sure you always give people choices. And so, do the research for them and just present them a list or something and say,
Yeah.
hey, thought this would be good. Because I mean, if we want to be able to help and if we really love the people that we're in relationships with, then we will help and assist them to get the help
Mhm.
that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And suggest to them, maybe this is, even people that you might know, friends who are drinking a lot, people in your life who are using things that you recognize are disproportionate, are they're using them to an extreme, and you're like, oh, I don't know. You could recommend, just say to them very clearly, like, maybe, nothing's wrong with you, but maybe you're having some kind of like trauma response that you're trying to deal with, or, very gently. And I think this idea of always phrasing everything in a question is like, maybe this is could be going on with you. It's like a gentle way to say, rather than read this book because what's wrong with you. um so yeah, but I think it's time, definitely, where we are in the development of the trauma conversation, to be suggesting to people that, hey, maybe this isn't your fault, you don't want to be acting this way. Even anger, okay, this is personal, I'm just going to go into this, but like, in my own marriage, experiencing anger from my husband, right? It's not that he's an angry person. He's actually really not. It's
Mhm.
not that he wants to be angry. It's not that he feels more listened to when he's angry, but he's an emergency room nurse. And when he's had a hard day, it's coming, his anger, or we'll be like, wow, he's angry, and then we'll be like, you're so angry. He's like, I'm not angry. It's like, okay, maybe having a trauma response, like you're having an experience, having a reaction to something that's happened. But I do, there's sort of this little catchphrase that we can say, which is like, name it, claim it, and change it. And so this is a big one in our family. Like, name it. Okay, yeah, I'm pissed. All right. Claim it, which means like accept it. Like, I'm pissed. You didn't make me pissed. She didn't make me pissed. The dog didn't make, I'm pissed. Okay, now how do I want to be? Deep breath, calm, chilled. Okay. So name it, claim it, change it can be a little.
Mhm. And I think it goes back to what you said in the beginning, know thyself.
Mhm.
When you know thyself, then you understand what's going on within your body, because it's your body that is going. It's like, I wait a minute, I'm feeling some type of way. I'm saying stuff I shouldn't say, and I mean, I found myself going back and going and saying, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
said that to you, and you had nothing to do with what I'm feeling or why I am angry or feeling this way.
Yeah.
Um, but in order to get there, again, you have to get to a place of being able to self-identify.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it's nothing wrong. I think, oh gosh, sometimes I want people to take this um superhuman or this savior complex off, or this I gotta be this way mask off. Take the mask off. It's better to be I don't want to say vulnerable, but transparent.
Mhm. Mhm.
Our
Yes.
transparency, you know, in the beginning, it might feel or make you feel funny or shameful, but
Mhm.
there's somebody that needs to know that it's all right to be normal.
Mhm. That's right. That's right.
You know, it's all right to be normal. Um, my daughter has anxiety, and I couldn't for the life of me, I couldn't understand anxiety. Like I won't even see people.
Mhm.
If I see it on the paper, I'm like, no,
Mhm.
no, I'm not seeing somewhere else because no. Um, but I couldn't understand it when she would go into these anxiety attacks, you know, because
Mhm.
hers is so much different. And so she would become clingy, she would become, or she would pace the floor back and forth, back and forth. And
Mhm.
I'm looking and I'm like, I'm getting anxiety now. Like, sit down, please sit down, you know. And I had to go and talk to someone who has the same disorder as her and ask them, how do you what are the signs? Show me. I mean, tell me because she's driving me bananas in this house and I don't understand how to
Mhm.
cope and it's making and so I had that conversation with her like when you are feeling like that,
Mhm.
can you just tell me
Yeah.
so I can know what I need to be in that moment to you?
Mhm.
Because when you just begin to act out, it's almost like I could feel her projection
Yeah.
off on me. Like, see me, see me, see me. And I'm like, that brings me anxiety
That's
because
right.
I don't know what to
Yeah.
do. I might see you, but I don't know what to do. What can
Yeah.
I do? And it triggers something on the inside of me because of my own issues, you know, and I can't. So for her, I had to get to the place where let me
Mhm.
know so I can know and
Yeah.
tell me what you need from me.
Mhm.
So I don't try to be something to you that's going to just bring on more anxiety.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the power question right there, isn't it? What can I do? How can I help you? What do you need? How did you say it was so perfect? What do you need from
What,
me?
what do you need from me in this
Yeah.
moment?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, that's if we have a safe enough partnership to ask that question, and that's a beautiful question to ask as well to our partners. And that we also exercise the right that if they're asking for something that we can't give, enter codependency, that we say, I hear that. Thank you for sharing. I actually can't do that for you right
Hmm.
now. Or thank you so much for saying what you need. And I can do that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And knowing that it's all right. It's all right when you can't deliver.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all right um, when you can't deliver and don't wear the feelings of failure.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
that's
many
right.
people do. They wear or they overextend themselves,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that will bring resentment
Hmm.
within a
Yeah.
relationship because after so many attempts of trying to be something that you know you can't be, you don't have the capacity, but you're still trying to do it. You're overextending yourself. You're harboring resentment, and before you know it, your relationship towards this person is going to be one of bitterness.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So when you really check in with yourself before saying, yes, I can do that for you, when you check in with yourself, you are really saving yourself. You're saving the relationship from the resentment,
Hmm.
which over time, resentment's an interesting one. Over time, we end up punishing our partners for resentment. You always may, or and it's like, ooh,
Hmm.
I always chose to,
Yeah.
and I resent you for it now.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Because you can have people who've been married for 40 years and the wife just gets frustrated and and like you said, and he's like, well, but you've always done it. Well, I've always not wanted to do it. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell him that 40 years ago?
Would
Why
have
did
saved
you?
a lot of money on therapy bills.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, why? Well, I didn't want to. One of the famous answers that I would get is, well, I didn't want to make them mad. What was gonna happen?
Right, right. Well,
Like,
here,
what's the worst thing that was gonna happen? So we really, we can address this, but let's really deal with this. You didn't want to make them mad.
Exactly.
You know, let's heal that part of you, cause look,
That's
40 years later, here it is. You've been cooking chicken and you can't stand chicken.
well, I didn't want to disappoint you. Okay, so you've been eating chicken for 40 years because you
Yeah,
disappoint me.
yeah, and you're sick of it. Just one day at the dinner table, you get up. I'm sick of this. You know, you're like, what in the world's wrong with you? So mom's going off. She's slamming doors, and it's like, what's wrong? All of a sudden, what's wrong? I'm sick of you people here. It's like, what's
Oh,
wrong?
that's great.
Yeah. So yeah. So I have enjoyed our conversation, and I think we could really go deeper, but and I want us to. So I want us to, if the listeners, if you have questions, if we didn't touch on something that you felt like we should have, we have been talking. I know last conversation we had that you're willing to do at least once monthly with us. So
Yeah, that'd be great. And yeah, once a month would be great. I love answering direct questions. So if your listeners want to write in with anything, I think that can lead to some really powerful conversations because likely what one person has a question about is very applicable to so many. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love this topic because it's so, oh gosh. I mean, even we talk more on marriage, but even with friendships,
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, it's like, you know, you've been friends with this person, but this person is such a big trigger to you,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
it's like, well, if they're triggering you and you don't see this friendship really going anywhere, why are you still
That's right.
in relationship with this person? So yeah, so I want us to really dig more into this so that we can begin to have a society, at least our tribe of people that are listening, can begin to have more healthy relationships within their communities, within their family, within their church family, whatever kind of ships they find themselves in, you know, and being able to get to a place where they know thyself, know what you feel
Mhm. That's right.
and what you feel, and figure out where is it coming from.
Mhm.
Why am I feeling this way?
Mhm.
Because sometimes it's not even necessarily the person that's sitting in front of you, it's somebody from your past.
That's right.
So again, I thank you for joining us, and
Yeah.
we will see you again next month.
Okay.
If you can tell everybody, we have it in the bio. Tell everybody how they can get in contact with you. If you can
Yeah.
just tell them about your email, because we have some listeners that will be on our that will not see our video, and they
Okay.
would just click on the link and they won't read. We have
Okay.
people who don't read, and they will
Right.
email me and say, "Hey, I wanted to
Okay.
get in contact with this person." So if you can just tell
Okay.
them how to get in contact with you.
Yeah. So my email, anybody's welcome to email me, and my website are just my first and last name. So it's Laurel Soleil, but it's just spelled Sole. I'm going to spell it out for everybody. So it's Laurel, Laurel, and then Sole. And that's either, if you want email, that's laurelsoul@gmail, or that's laurelsoul.com. So super simple. Just get a hold of me with anything, questions. If you're like, oh, I'd like a book on this topic, whatever, that's how you can find me, laurelsoul.com or laurelsoul@gmail.com.
Thank you. Thank you. So, again, thank you guys for joining us. We will see you again on next month. I will put out something ahead of time so you guys can listen, and maybe maybe we can do an afternoon where we can do a live session too, and then have people to come in with their questions as well as those that write in. So, but we'll talk
Perfect.
about it. So I'm excited.
I'm
Again,
up for all the above. So you just let me know what your listeners want.
good. Again, thank you for joining the Healing Place podcast, and we will see you on the